Good morning chaps and welcome back to the Gamer Muscle YouTube channel. In this video we're taking a look at Imola for RaceRoom Racing Experience, which will be added to RaceRoom Racing Experience sometime next week. That's September the 15th or so. In order to take a look at the track, I thought we had to jump into what in my opinion is not only the best series of cars but the best car and the best liveried car in RaceRoom Racing Experience, and that is the Tic Tac BMW 90s DTM car. I mean, the BMW without the Tic Tac livery alone is pretty sexy, but with the Tic Tac livery on top, and you've essentially, if you were to take this car through the centre of London after 8 PM or so, you'd have a crowd of women following you, lusting after you because of the sheer delight that is the Tic Tac livery. It'd be like a scene from The Walking Dead when they take a vehicle through a city in that. Now, to increase the excitement as well, I thought we'd start at the back of the grid and put 38 cars on the circuit. A totally natural and normal racing situation to occur at Imola these days. But at worst, it is at least a highlight of the fact that you can just cram in a Tesco's car park worth of vehicles onto the racetracks in RaceRoom Racing Experience, and the sim works and runs really smooth. Now, in terms of the circuit, which is why we're here, it's actually a really nice version of Imola. I think it is a newer version of the track. In some simulators it's a little bit dated. I think post sort of 2007 there were big changes to the track, and then some simulators seem to have gone for some details and others for other details. But in general, this actually seems to line up quite closely to my expectation of the circuit, mostly from playing the Assetto Corsa version, and I'm pretty sure the AC version is laser scanned, so having the track line up with that makes sense and is probably a good sign. Generally, you know, the approach to this circuit is the same as the AC version of the track, so even though I don't think they are using laser scanned data for this version in RaceRoom Racing Experience, you don't really notice it. And if anything, actually, what you do notice is they've done a really good job on the subtle curbing details at the side of the track, and it's got some nice sausages, which you've got to be careful. As you know from our streams, you want to stroke the sausage, you don't want to smash the sausage. You're in for a bad time if you smash the sausage. Stroke sausages are always happy sausages. That's pretty self-explanatory. But interestingly, at Imola, the sausages aren't continuous long sausages. They're sort of individual sausages that really, if you do totally hammer them, you're in for a bad time, especially with tighter vehicles, Formula vehicles, and faster race cars. These 90s DTM cars actually ride the sausages like a boss, because they've generally got more suspension travel than a kid's bouncy castle, so you can just get away with it. And you'll actually find, I mean, I found towards the end of this race here that you can significantly improve your lap times if you do attack the sausages correctly. But that's enough about sausages. We've got a bit of a sausage obsession going on there. In terms of the actual track details external to the road surface, which I think is quite nice, the side details are really well done. I think maybe not the trees so much. I mean, they look fine, but they do at times look a little bit flat. But the stuff like the walls and the external track textures, the stands with the people in them, and the surrounding track details are really nice and immersive. And I think one of the things that RaceRoom does really nicely is it gets that balance right for me between looking like a simulator and looking like reality. It doesn't look over-the-top cinematic gamey. It looks very practical, and in many ways just looks really nice and raw. Especially if you're playing this in VR, it noticeably looks really nice if you've got a fast enough system to get the high graphic quality out of it. But if you play with the camera at a realistic view on the dash, it can at times look absolutely extraordinary, whilst running really well, because RaceRoom at its core, its engine isn't the most recent of engines. It's using more sort of trickery to make it look decent rather than just sheer graphics card grunt. It really just goes to show you how much effect talented artists have on the end visual result with a driving simulator, as opposed to necessarily just having really talented graphical programmers. Though I'm sure the graphical programmers in Sector 3 are also really good. Just pictured a quiet programmer crying to themselves there. To be fair, I did really notice on this track actually the shadows that the mostly 2D looking trees cast onto the track, especially at the different times of day, really do actually have a big impact, and they actually do really transform the visual appearance of the circuit. And because with RaceRoom Racing Experience you do have the choice of having morning, midday, afternoon and late afternoon, or sunset they call it, and those different light settings really do drastically change the end visual feel of the circuit. And some of the, especially on tracks like this where you have trees either side of the track, the flickering of the shadows through the cockpit and the way the shadows actually mask some of the breakpoints does actually have a tangible effect on the end drive of the circuit, and it is done in a realistic way. It's not in an annoying way. The shadows look really nice, so well done graphical programmer for getting smooth, crisp but smooth and not unrealistic shadows operating at a good frame rate. There we go, you can stop crying. Now, I think rather interestingly, with Imola in particular, it's a nice circuit to go to if you do a lot of driving with direct drive wheels, because it's a counter-clockwise circuit, and most racetracks, as I'm sure you know, are more in the clockwise direction. Now, if you're using weaker wheels, it might not be that noticeable, but if you do play with stronger force feedback or you're particularly weak, you do find driving other circuits that you tend to get more aches in your left. Hang on, let's think about this. Turning right using your right arm. So yes, normally it's your left arm that ends up aching. My left arm looks as if I spend too much time doing something you might do with one arm, and my other arm is totally weak. So going to this track every now and again from the other circuits is a nice break and a good way to balance your arms out for a bit of a change. Though you will find, if you do a sort of 20+ lap race with high force feedback, your right arm probably will hurt a lot more than what you'd expect from sim racing, because as I say, you don't normally use your right arm as much unless you're American and you just like that sort of turn left racing. But you know, to be fair, we don't really need to talk about Americans. They're not really people. If you're actually honest about it, ever since they decided to throw those tea bags in the sea, I just lost respect for them as a nation, and I don't think anyone should respect them. Back onto the circuit though, of course, I mean, I'm going to have to mention it. This track is famous for killing race drivers, and that's probably why most people outside of sim racing or even outside of racing know this track, because in 1994 it was a somewhat brutal day for Formula 1. Of course, the version of the track that you actually can drive now in simulators has been changed quite significantly, namely those first collection of corners. They're not just a single sweeping corner, they've actually broken it up to stop cars from driving into walls at full speed should the suspension break. Rather interestingly, they've included the memorial for the dead race drivers in the actual virtual version of the track, which I was thinking about. It's actually kind of strange. It's like one of those, I don't know if you guys remember back in the 90s, or sort of, well, the late 90s, early 2000s, you got those websites started to pop up for when you die, you can have your, you have a virtual gravestone to sort of commemorate yourself on the internet, because the internet was like a newfangled exciting thing back then. So those kind of gimmicks really work. But this is actually, you know, a preserved version in 3D in a virtual world of a actual grave site. And I just thought it was quite interesting. I've obviously seen it with some other games as well. It always seems to be rather accidental though. But the key is, if you're going to die and you want to be memorialised for eternity, make sure you die at a racetrack, and make sure that you're a famous person before you do die at the racetrack. Because if you're just a marshal and say a tyre hits you, or, you know, a spectator, you probably won't get anything to commemorate your loss of life. So there you go, tips to be immortalised. Forget that luxurious gravestone that costs thousands of pounds, which is inevitably going to fall down after a couple hundred years. This software is going to be around. Who knows, maybe someone's going to upload the internet into a flash drive in 50, 100 years time and launch it into space, and aliens are going to find it, and this will be the only remnants of mankind. You just don't know, but it's worth planning for this kind of thing. So I think we've gone a little bit off topic there, some might say. As we approach 5th place, we are making our way to the front of the grid, filling up the video here with completely inane commentary. That's Gamer Muscle videos. I did put the difficulty on a bit too easy. I put it on adaptive, and for the most part, I mean, this is one of the things I do like about RaceRoom as well, is that you can just load it up put adaptive AI on, jump to a track, and for the most part that actually works really well. But in this case, on this circuit, the adaptive AI, maybe because it's a new circuit and the AI hasn't defined paths or its difficulty against myself on this circuit, but for whatever reason it was as if I was running the AI on about 80%, whereas if I'm manually setting the difficulty, I'd put it around about 95, 100% in RaceRoom to end up with actual close racing. So the adaptive AI in this case didn't work too well, but it was alright because I started at the back and it was fun going through all the traffic. But that might be something to consider if you do get this track and you are racing the 90s DTM cars like myself and you do find it too easy. You might want to turn the adaptive AI off and just go for 90, 95, 100% on the difficulty, and that'll probably end up with some nice side-by-side racing. And the AI actually, though, rather than though they were too easy in terms of their actual top speed, they were taking most of the corners pretty correctly, carrying a reasonable amount of speed through them. The start of the race wasn't too bad. This is one of those tracks where AI often in various simulators tend to get bunched up on these corners that we're driving through. Now at the beginning they were actually all right at the start of this race, as you saw. So for the most part the AI seems fine. They just need to get the actual top speed settings correct so that they take these corners and the Aqua Mineralis corners at the proper speeds, because that's where they were slow. But there you go, we successfully passed 38 cars and we're now able to rag this tic-tac through the track at full velocity. Just so much fun. I genuinely do think the 90s DTM cars are the best cars that you can get for RaceRoom Racing experience. I often get asked what cars should I buy, and I would say the 90s DTM cars. Maybe not if you want to race online, because they're not necessarily the most active cars online, but RaceRoom at the moment isn't really that good for jumping online racing anyway. So I'd be getting content in RaceRoom mostly for single player, and with that in mind, the 90s DTM cars absolutely fantastic. You can get a starter pack. I think it's $6.99 or around about £6, and that actually gets you the 90s DTM Mercedes car and a bunch of tracks. The nice thing with that, and this is the case with all the cars, even if you only own one car from a given series, you will still get to race against all the AI with all the different liveries and everything else. So getting a starter pack allows you to drive one of the 90s DTM cars and have an absolute blast with it. And then maybe you want to look at getting something like the European track pack or whatever tickles your fancy. But absolutely fantastic job on the circuit. I'm going to enjoy driving this some more when they actually finally roll it out. This is just the beta version of the track, so they're maybe going to do some more tweaks and changes to things, but to be honest, it looks pretty polished and finalised to me, and falls in line with the very polished and well executed content that's in the rest of the simulator. So I hope that was useful for those of you that were looking at RaceRoom Racing experience, wondering what car to get, and were interested to see what this new Imola track's like. If it wasn't interesting, tough, you've just wasted 13 minutes of your life. Don't forget to click the subscribe button, don't forget to like, or I mean indeed dislike if you dislike it, and I'll see you guys very soon indeed. We'll be back with some more VR content, some more driving simulators, and some more slightly obscure banter. Until then though, take care. I am actually indeed off for a cup of tea again. It has happened. It's early in the morning. It's tea time. Fantastic. Goodbye.